You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
Hi, hello everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. My name is Lance Sanderson. I'm your host as always, and joining me once again this week after his bout with some personal stuff that he had going on last week is my good buddy and colleague Erick Trickel. Erick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm glad to be back. I had to take some time away for personal reasons, which I'm actually going to end up talking about on this podcast, but that's for a little bit later. But I'm glad to be back, glad to be talking Broncos. I'm glad that the Broncos were able to end the season by giving the now former Oakland Raiders a loss. And I love saying that, now former Oakland Raiders. You know, technically they're still not the Las Vegas Raiders yet. They won't be until the start of the new league year. But they're the former Oakland Raiders, okay?
I love being able to say that the last thing that the Oakland Raiders have ever done was losing to the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
That's the best thing ever.
Yes, it is. We hate the Raiders here. Everyone who's listening should hate the Raiders too. We're Broncos fans, guys. Hate the Raiders.
Well, and that's kind of the theme of today's episode, Erick. And we talked about this briefly before we got started today. And, you know, we've always been, you know, the Dove Valley Deep Divers, the analysts, and we try to give you the best analysis that we can. And today, instead of doing that, instead of really breaking down anything, obviously with the Broncos not playing anymore, it's kind of a little bit early to get talking about some of the draft stuff. We're having our fan episode this week. You know, we're gonna talk about our, you know, some favorite moments of this year, some favorite least favorite moments of this year, and go back and take a look back at the last decade. We are moving into the 2020s now, the roaring 20s. Everyone, they better be having great Gatsby parties all over the place. I mean, come on, let's go. But I mean, it's just talking about being a Broncos fan and just the way that this team has impacted our lives over the last year, or last 10 years, anyways. So here we go.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Over this last year, it's been kind of an interesting year to really think about, really kind of analyze and everything like that. And I mean, it was a hard year because with the Broncos being so up and down, and I mean the big down moments, obviously losing, you know, big close games and last minute field goals and everything like that. The struggles and consistency of the quarterback play, Flacco and Brandon Allen, then getting to see Drew Lock. I mean, it's really kind of hard for me to pick just one thing that is like my most favorite moment or most favorite thing about the 2019 season. But Erick, I'm gonna start this off here by saying that the best thing that I think came out of 2019 is the fact that the Broncos did actually get Drew Lock, and it looks like they've hit. It looks like he is going to be the quarterback of the future. I mean, there's just the poise and the composure that the kid has, the moxie and everything like that. That's the best thing. The Broncos have been needing that quarterback since Peyton Manning retired, and to be able to have him and the plethora of weapons that they have surrounding him, I mean, they need another couple of pieces, but I mean, finishing 7-9, and not necessarily a lot of it was his fault as far as the losing goes. Obviously, he only lost one game in his 5 starts, but just the fact that, you know, the Broncos have a potential answer moving forward, and we don't have to talk about the quarterback position in the 2020 NFL draft. That's the biggest takeaway for me for this year.
I definitely think that's a good one. Being able to have that key position figured out, or at least potentially figured out, is just a breath of fresh air for the Broncos, because they haven't had that since Peyton Manning left. I mean, we almost paid Brock Osweiler. We had to deal with Trevor Siemian. We had to deal with Paxton Lynch, Case Keenum, all these other quarterbacks that we had to deal with. And it's nice that we finally have a guy so we don't have to worry about that. My favorite Bronco moment is one specific play. And the reason why this play is my favorite is just because I remember all the whooping and hollering that I did after seeing it. It was when Dalton Reisner basically picked up Phillip Lindsay and threw him in for a touchdown. Like, it's just such a funny moment, and it shows the competitiveness of an offensive lineman that you see, but you don't really get to see that obvious. So watching him do that, the rookie picking up the second-year player, was just tremendous, and it showed that there is a lot of fight left in these Denver Broncos, and they were pushing for it, obviously. I mean, he picked up the guy and basically threw him into the end zone. But moving on, we're going to go and talk about our least favorite moment of the 2019 season, and there's a lot of them. I mean, it wasn't a good year. Obviously, the Denver Broncos, they failed to meet expectations. A lot of Broncos fans and analysts actually thought that this was a team that could potentially compete for a playoff spot. They thought Joe Flacco was going to be a guy who can come in and at least be a solid foundation, and that the running game would get going and the defense would play tremendous football, and it just didn't happen. So when you have all this letdown of a year, there's a lot of moments that can stand out as your least favorite moment. But for me, it's losing to the Oakland Raiders in the season opener. I mean, in our opening for this episode, guys, we were talking about how we hate the Raiders. Man, I would have loved to have been able to sweep the Oakland Raiders as their last year as the Oakland Raiders. That would have been tremendous, and who knows what it would have done for the trajectory of the rest of the season. But it just comes down to the fact that Denver lost to the Oakland Raiders to start their season, and that hurts. As a Broncos fan, that really hurts.
Yeah, and that kind of ties in perfectly to the point that I was going to make as far as the least favorite moment of the 2019 season, because the Broncos were actually in a position to win that game, and Deshaun Hamilton dropped a crucial touchdown pass. I think it was late in the third quarter, and it would have gotten the Broncos to within a score, and it really could have changed the entire dynamic of that game. So that's really leads into and it was really kind of the theme to me for the Broncos, especially on the way that they were losing the close games. And I mean, we've got 3 games that they lost by game-winning field goals in the last minute of the game. You've got the one that is my least favorite moment of the entire season, and that's the Minnesota game. I mean, Brandon Allen came out and played a really hot first half, got the Broncos up 20-0, and I mean, they just were marching up and down the field against the Vikings, and it was going to stun the NFL because everyone had the Vikings winning that game. And it turned out that was the case. But the way that the Broncos played in the first half, and then the way that they came out and played so flat in the second half, and they let Minnesota have a couple of big touchdown plays. Obviously, the Stephon Diggs post against Chris Harris Jr. There's a plethora of issues that the Broncos had there, but just the way that the team came out just hot and heavy, firing on all cylinders, and then laid the biggest egg of the last 5 years in the NFL. Like, it was definitely the most disappointing thing that we saw with the Broncos this year. Now, we're going to kind of move forward again here just a little bit, and it's not just necessarily about the Broncos, it is kind of about the fans, and we're going to share a couple of personal stories with you guys really quick. Just our most favorite personal moment of this last year, and neither one of these are during the season. As most of you know, I went to Nashville to cover the NFL draft this year, and being behind the scenes and everything like that was absolutely a complete and total dream come true. But an even more personal story about that is, so I went down with my parents, and they were out there standing out in the rain in the first round, and when the Broncos came up to pick at 20 after they traded down, there was a bunch of Broncos fans standing around my parents, and they were all betting, who was going to be the pick. And so little did everybody else know, I was back behind the scenes, and I remember specifically getting a text message from Erick saying that it was Noah Fant and it was good information, we could go with it. So I texted my dad immediately, and this was before the Broncos were even on the clock, or it was either right before or just shortly after the Broncos were on the clock. And I sent this text message to my dad. I said, it's 100% Noah Fant. Let everybody know if you want to. Well, he just kind of let himself shuffle in the back a little bit, and everyone was saying, well, it's going to be Drew Lock, it's going to be Dalton Risner, it's going to be this guy or whatever. And my dad just piped up and he says, I'll bet you guys anything that it's going to be Noah Fant. And they're like, nah, the Broncos don't need a tight end. They don't need a tight end. They need to go get Drew Lock. They need to get this quarterback of the future. And Dad's like, well, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Noah Fant. When Roger Goodell announced the pick, all those Broncos fans looked at my dad and they're like, how did you know that? Like, how did you guess that? And he said, well, my son writes for Mile High Huddle. He's in the back right now covering the draft for everybody. He told me this 10 minutes ago.
That's a good one, man. I love hearing stuff like that. It's just awesome to see about how just stuff like that, hearing stuff about that. I mean, I haven't been able to go to the draft yet. I hope to at some point, just for the experience. And I'm glad that helped your whole experience you had there. And for me, for my personal story, there was a couple things I could have gone. I almost want to go and talk about how over the last decade, I've had the opportunity to do something that I love. And I know that you can speak for this as well, Lance, about being able to cover the Denver Broncos. It's been 6 years, 7 years for me covering the Denver Broncos. It's been a long time since Chad Jensen, our boss here at Mile High Huddle, he found me. I was just commenting on a website called Pro Football Spot. And he hit me up. He's like talking about how, hey, you say some interesting stuff. You clearly know your stuff. Like, do you want to join? I did. And since then, we've moved around quite a bit. We were with Pro Football Spot. We were with Predominantly Orange. I took off, and I was the head of that Pro Football Spot for a while. We ended up joining Scout as where Mile High Huddle was born. I took off. I went to go cover all Denver-based sports for another site that's part of Fansided. And after a month, I came back to Mile High Huddle and everything like that. And we were with CBS Sports, and now we're with Sports Illustrated. It's been a tremendous thing, and we are so thankful for that, and it's so thankful for you guys who listen to this and read our content and everything, because without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we thank you for that. And despite making that personal, that actually wasn't my personal story. My personal story is actually about a year ago, and I remember I was sitting down, I was talking to my wife when I got a phone call, and the phone call was saying, hey, look, the Baltimore Ravens are making Joe Flacco available, and the Denver Broncos are interested. They've been talking about a trade. They've had some communication. It's probably going to happen. And I remember because immediately afterwards, I decided to do an article. And this article was about some veteran quarterbacks that the Broncos could go after. And in there, I talk about specifically Joe Flacco and how he is the most likely quarterback for them to go after. And a bunch of comments that I got about it were just very hateful and just very tearing me down about it. And so, I was being called a liar. I was being accused of making stuff up, which is something that I have never done and nothing I will ever do. If I'm wrong on information, it is my bad. I know a lot of people know that I blew a whole situation last free agency. That is my fault completely. I mistook, actually, some emails I got, some text messages I got on a very bad day where I was having surgery. So, and that doesn't excuse it. I just didn't do my job well enough. But I never make stuff up, and I never lie. It's mistakes happen though. But with this, it was just I wasn't making this up. Like, I was trying to tell these people, I'm not making it up. Just wait and see. Just wait and see. And then the actual moment is when the trade was announced, and I just had that. I was just able to have kind of that gloaty aspect to my demeanor about it because, hey, look, I reported this back in early mid-January, and I was called all these things about it, and who was correct? Like, I had very reliable information. I passed it along. It was information that I double, triple, quadruple checked even, just to make sure. So, it's kind of a bit of a ego play memory for me, I guess, would be the best way to put it. But that is my favorite personal story of it, of the last decade, or the last year even, is just being able to just have that self-satisfaction that despite what all these people said about me, I was correct. I knew I was correct, and I just never backed down.
Well, that's a big thing. It's I remember when all that went down, and then I also remember the big issue that we had with the whole Adrian Amos situation. It was a mistake, and stuff like that happens. And I've seen people attack you a lot, and I don't appreciate it. I try to stay out of it as much as possible. But to come out, and not that this is the only one you've ever gotten right, but to have that validation where I reported this in January and it actually came true. Like, this is information that I've had for a long time, and it's good quality information. To have that, and to not necessarily throw it in people's face, but to just say, hey, I hit this first, and not necessarily give me the credit that I deserve, but understand that I'm not ever making this stuff up. Whatever I'm telling you guys is stuff that I'm getting told directly and can actually get released out. So I'm kudos to you on that. I wish that I could, get in touch with some of your sources and have some of that kind of information like driven my way. But at the same time, you pretty much tell me everything you get told anyway. So it's almost like I have that information at my hand at my fingertips like almost every single day. So But anyways, guys, we're going to have to take a quick break here really fast. But before we do, I just want to remind you all to head on over to milehighhuddle.com to check out all of our written content on your Denver Broncos. At the Huddle website, you'll get breaking news, analysis, and opinion articles, as well as in-depth film breakdowns of not only Broncos players, but matchups to watch in an upcoming game or even our top-notch NFL draft coverage. Also, make sure you take a couple minutes to create your own personalized profile and hit up the comment section to voice your opinions on any topics that you agree or disagree with. It's completely free, it's easy to use, and we all love to discuss Broncos football with our readers. You can also sit in with us during the live game thread to talk your thoughts on how the team is performing as well. So with that, we got to step away for a few minutes. We'll be right back. Sit tight.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys. Thank you for staying through the break and everything. To kick off the second half of this, we're going to talk about our favorite moment of the decade. Now, to preface this, we're not going to talk about the Super Bowl because obviously that is a tremendous moment for all Broncos fans, and I'm pretty sure both Lance and I would be picking that moment, or that this one's for Pat, because that is such an emotional moment for Broncos fans. The whole tribute to Pat Bowlen with everything that he was battling and going through. May he rest in peace, and just that whole situation is something that is dear to all Broncos fans' heart. So our favorite moment's not going to be the Super Bowl because, as I said, that would probably be what we both pick. But my favorite moment of the decade was Peyton Manning going out there, and because of a concert, I think it was, the Baltimore Ravens weren't able to have the season opener at home. They had to have it in Denver. And Peyton Manning went out there and demolished them. Now, granted, how the season turned out wasn't so great. But just that moment, after everything that happened in the playoffs beforehand, the Raheem Moore getting beat for the big touchdown, Tony Carter, Robert Ayers, both also blew aspects of that play. But just that whole situation with that game, all the weird penalties that were called, or bad calls if you want to call them that, just everything behind it, and going out there and just watching this game of pure vengeance from Peyton Manning and the Broncos offense was my favorite moment. And there was a lot to choose from too, but that one, that holds a special place for me.
And it should. It absolutely should. I mean, Peyton Manning came out and threw for 7 touchdown passes that day. And I think he hit Julius Thomas 3 times. Like, it was an absolute slaughter. Absolute slaughter. I'll never forget, and actually one of my favorite plays from that was kind of just a little bit of a validation and like a redemption play, was Dallas Clark took a pop pass up I think it was the left seam, and Raheem Moore came downhill and absolutely destroyed Dallas Clark. It was awesome. And at that point, I knew that there was something special with the Broncos team, and obviously that's 2013. That's the year that Peyton Manning shattered every record in the quarterback record book, 55 touchdowns. Like, it was an amazing season until, early February in, 2014, but we won't talk about that. Now, as far as my favorite moment of the decade, this one also involves Peyton Manning as well, but it's not one that really, a lot of people are going to shine. It's why would I go in this direction? But to me, this was the one that really kind of confirmed to me that this Broncos team in 2012, the Week 6 game against the San Diego Chargers at the time, where the Broncos were down 24-0 at halftime. And going into the game, the Broncos were 2-3, and everyone's really disappointed. Peyton Manning's not playing great football. The defense isn't really playing that good of football. They just got Von Miller, and I believe they had Sean Phillips at the time. That was last year at Elvis Dumerville, excuse me. And so just the way that the Broncos had played going into that game, and then to go down 24-0 at halftime, and then to all of a sudden have everything click, and that pass from Peyton Manning to Brandon Stokely to give the Broncos the lead there, that moment still sends chills down my spine. And every time that I get a chance to watch just the game highlights of that game, I mean, Tony Carter played an amazing game, although that might be the only amazing game he'd ever really played in a Broncos uniform. Chris Harris Jr. had a pick 6 as well. Like, just that moment, that, the Broncos are here. This team is actually for real. Didn't they go on to win their next 11 games or something like that? That is the most perfect moment for me over the last decade. It really is. Now, my least favorite moment over the last decade happens to be that game against Baltimore in the AFC divisional playoffs later that year. I mean, obviously you've got the Jacoby Jones the big long touchdown pass, Raheem Moore flailing with his arms over his head, Tony Carter, Robert Ayers not holding contain and allowing Flacco a lane to step up and then heave the ball forever and a mile down the field. Like, there's not only that. I mean, it's just the complete and total disappointment. I mean, Peyton Manning had a fairly decent game that really couldn't get the Broncos running game going very much, but the really weird calls, I'm going to just call this point blank period, the blown pass interference call against Chris Harris Jr. in that game, which gave the Ravens a first down. I believe that was in overtime too. So like, there's just that game. I believe that Broncos team was the best Broncos team of the decade. They were the most complete team, if nothing else. Peyton Manning was playing really good football. Eric Decker, Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas was starting to come into the fold. I believe Noshawn Marino was running back and everything like that. Von Miller, obviously. The defense was very good. They could consistently create pass pressure, very good passing defense. Like, that team, honestly, if it doesn't go the Ravens' way in that game, I believe that the Broncos walk out of there with a Super Bowl victory. I really do. They would have won two and could have potentially won a back-to-back if they would have actually showed up in New York to play against the Seahawks that year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's a good one. All of these are good moments. I mean, there was a lot of good moments over for the Broncos and a lot of bad moments for them as well. For my least favorite one of the decade, guys might want to grab your tissues for it, but it's Mr. Bolin passing away and losing his battle with Alzheimer's. And I went back and forth over this one because I didn't want to go super personal with this. But on Christmas Day, the reason why I wasn't on the last episode was I found out that my grandmother passed away and lost her battle with Alzheimer's. So this one this moment really hits home with me, even though it happened before my grandmother passed away. But what he meant to the NFL world, to the Broncos fans, to just sports people in general, is something that can't be understated. And just knowing what my grandmother went through with her battle of Alzheimer's, I can't even begin to imagine I can imagine what he was going through with his and his family and everything. And just, it's tough. And my grandmother was a wonderful woman. I love her dearly. I miss her. She's in a better place. And but yeah, it's Mr. B passing away, and it's not just his passing. It's the fact that the NFL failed to get him into the Hall of Fame as he should have been before he passed away. That is such a travesty to me. There is no excuse for the series of events unfolding the way they did with that, because Pat Bolin, he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame before he was actually inducted into it. He should have been able to be there for that moment, for that enshrinement. But guys, we're going to start talking about what to expect from us here with Dove Valley Deep Divers over the next year. But before I get to that, if you guys know anybody who's suffering from Alzheimer's, please reach out to them and say you love them, because you don't know when the last moment's going to be. My grandmother, I haven't spoken to her in years because she forgot who I was. So just reach out to them, and even if they don't remember you, just let them know that you do love them. But guys, enough sadness. Lance and I, we have big things planned for over the next year, and we're gonna work on taking this podcast to a whole new level. And to start that off with is just talking about the stuff that's coming from, at least on my end anyways, is draft stuff. If you guys don't know, I am the senior draft analyst with MileHuddle.com, which Lance introduces me as every single podcast. So we have tons of stuff. I have tons of stuff planned for draft-related content over the next few weeks prior to the NFL draft, as well as afterwards, breaking down about who the players draft, who the undrafted free agents, what chances these guys have making the roster, their impact, stuff like that. So much stuff planned for just the draft aspect of things, building the team, building the Broncos. But Lance can definitely step in and talk a little bit more about what you guys can expect from us.
Well, and the big thing with me is the fact that this year is really going to be the first. I've done a really good job over the last handful of years at being a pretty good draft analyst. But I want to take my draft analyst and the stuff that I do, the work that I do, I want to take it to the next level. And I'm really kind of hoping that being able to do the stuff that we want to do here on the podcast is going to help me learn and help me grow and help me become a better draft analyst. But not only that, I mean, we're going to try to get Nick and Carl on the show a lot. We're going to try to reach out to some other people in the draft community and see if they want to come on and just talk some thoughts about football. And then after that, I mean, with Eric and the status that he has, being our Denver Broncos insider, also as a senior NFL draft analyst, I mean, we got free agency coming up. We've got, I want to really kind of dive into some good, not necessarily film breakdowns, because it's going to be a little bit hard to do on a show where you listen to, but just good player breakdowns where we can just sit down and discuss and debate just one singular player over the course of this of this draft season and over the course of this next offseason. So with that, guys, we're going to take another quick break, and on the other side, we got some news for you.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back to Dove Valley Deep Divers. Earlier this week, we did see Eddie Jackson, Bears superstar free safety, get paid big time. Big, huge money. He's now the highest paid free safety in all of the NFL. 4 years, $58.4 million with 33 total guaranteed. Now, the Broncos also have a superstar free safety that is looking to get paid this year as well. He is an impending free agent. Same draft class as Eddie Jackson as well. And, I mean, with Justin Simmons and the play that he had this year, he got selected to the second team All-Pro team for the Associated Press. He was also named to the first team All-Pro team from Pro Football Focus. With that, I mean, you could take a little bit of credence with that. And the ability of this man, Eric, I know you've got some information. What's going on with Justin Simmons and the Broncos?
Well, my assumption, I should say, is that Justin Simmons and his camp, they wanted to wait until after the season. They knew that Eddie Jackson was up for a new deal. Jamal Adams, a bunch of other safeties, they are up for big contracts. And while he was looking at being the highest paid safety, they wanted to see where that market actually fell. So I believe that this Eddie Jackson deal is going to be, at the very least, the baseline for it. I wouldn't be surprised if, well, I can almost guarantee that if the deal gets done with Justin Simmons prior to having to use the franchise tag anyways, that he will be the highest paid safety at that time. Like, he is going to beat this $14.6 million on an average per year basis that Eddie Jackson got. My assumption would be that he probably comes in about 14.7, 14.75 on this. But ever since the news of Eddie Jackson's deal basically breaking, I had seen a lot of people talking about how Eddie Jackson is so much better than Justin Simmons, which he has a longer body of work. Justin Simmons has spent multiple years miscast in this Broncos defense, whereas Eddie Jackson, he got to play under Vic Fangio, and he was playing tremendous football. Justin Simmons was targeted 47 times compared to 41 for Jackson. He allowed 25 receptions compared to 23 for Eddie Jackson, which is a reception percentage of 53.2 compared to 56.1. So even still, outside of the pass rusher, Justin Simmons had the better year. 239 yards allowed for Justin Simmons, 256 allowed for Eddie Jackson. That is 9.6 yards per reception for Simmons compared to 11.1. So even though he allowed 2 more catches, he allowed significantly less yards. That's going to be a huge thing there. He allowed less yards after the catch with 85 to 103. His long that he allowed was only 5 yards less than Eddie Jackson's. He allowed no touchdowns, had 4 interceptions, and 11 pass breakups. Justin Simmons allowed 2 touchdowns, only had 2 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups. There was an NFL rating when targeting Justin Simmons of 32.1. Targeting Eddie Jackson, 70.8. Penalties, Justin Simmons 1, Eddie Jackson 2. Justin Simmons had a tremendous year. He was deserving of All-Pro first team, but he didn't get it. He got second team. He very deserving of the Pro Football Focus first team. And basically, Denver's going to look at this last year. Well, shouldn't say Denver. Justin Simmons' agents are going to look at this year, seeing what Eddie Jackson got, and they're like, look, the minimum we're going to take is $14.61 million on an average per year basis. We are not taking any less than what Eddie Jackson got, because this was the better safety this last year. He is showing that he is hitting his stride, and he can be this caliber safety in this Broncos scheme. You have Vic Fangio there. He's only going to improve, especially now that he knows his scheme down. It was a little bit of a rough start for Justin Simmons during the first 4 weeks because Kareem Jackson, he was hurt. He was still learning the scheme. Justin Simmons was still learning the scheme. And once that all got fixed, he became dominant. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There were still some mishaps. But Eddie Jackson is making mistakes too. There is no way that Justin Simmons is taking anything less than what Eddie Jackson got. And don't be surprised if this deal ends up making him the highest paid safety in the NFL. And whenever Jamal Adams does his deal, Jamal Adams is going to become the highest paid safety in the NFL. That's just how it works. But at least for a short time, Justin Simmons, once his deal is done, can say, hey, look, I'm the highest paid safety in the NFL.
Well, and with the way that Eddie Jackson played a couple of years ago, that season that he had under Vic Fangio was just absolutely lights out, especially with just the way that he was getting his hands on the football. He had, I think, 6 interceptions or something like that. So I really want to see Justin Simmons kind of take over get that ball hawk mentality where he's getting his hands on a lot of footballs and everything. That's really the only that's really the only thing that I want more out of Justin Simmons is the ability to go and create those turnovers in just a little bit higher capacity, you know. But when it needs to happen, Justin Simmons figures out a way to get it done. I mean, we're not talking about a guy that can't catch the football. It's just any time that he does get his hands on the football, he's taking it the other way. So, I just want to be able to see him go out there and free range just a little bit more and go out there and be that dynamic turnover machine guy that I really thought that he was going to be, along with Chris Harris Jr. under Vic Fangio. Just the way that Fangio runs his scheme. I mean, he's always has a safety in the top 10 at least in interceptions. He has a cornerback that's always in the top 5 in interceptions. And this year the Broncos just couldn't get it done as far as that goes. But to have a player like Justin Simmons who's really coming into his own, and you're absolutely right, the turnaround that he had over the course of this season where he was struggling first thing earlier this year, and I mean still taking the bad angles that you'd seen with him in the running game and the bad angles that you'd see with him chasing down guys as far as like deep routes goes, deep posts and corners and everything like that. There is still some mishaps with him, but at the same time, I mean, he's still growing, and he's such a good leader in the locker room. He's such a good man off of the field. Like, this is a guy that the Broncos need to get taken care of, and even if Jamal Adams does come out and hit $15 million, I think Justin Simmons could potentially hit that $15 million a year mark. But I mean, even if Jamal Adams comes out and eclipses that, it's not going to matter. Justin Simmons is going to get paid. He's well deserving of getting paid this year, and I really hope that the Broncos do right by him. And instead of playing this dog and pony show with the franchise tag, I hope they get a deal done before free agency starts. Just get it done and over with, and show the players that you have on your roster currently that if you come out and you improve every single year, and you come out and you become a dominant player at the position, a top 5 player at the safety position or whatever position you're playing, you're going to get paid, and we're going to treat you the right way. And Denver sometimes doesn't have a propensity to do that with John Elway. I mean, we've seen it with Von Miller. We saw it with Demaryius Thomas. I mean, Matt Prater and Ryan Clady. Like, there's a whole bunch of players that were deserving of getting paid, and it was just when is this going to get done? I want this done as soon as possible, and I really want to see Justin Simmons in a Broncos uniform for at least the next 4 years. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us today. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can follow us both on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, be sure to follow at Mile High Huddle. Set up your notifications for instant updates on your Denver Broncos. Each and every story published on the Huddle website is posted immediately on our Twitter handle, so you guys have instant access right at your fingertips. You guys can also like Mile High Huddle's Facebook page as well. We love and appreciate all of your guys' support, and if it weren't for you all, we wouldn't be able to do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. So until next time, Broncos country, you guys stay safe, take care, and have a good one.